Russia has accused Ukraine of striking Vladimir Putin's state residence. Ukraine claims it had nothing to do with this attack and demands at least some evidence. In response, Russia made a mess of itself and is somehow staying silent. But a legitimate question arises. So what actually happened there? What is the Kremlin up to? Is this just a provocation or preparation for new crimes? The explosion of the peace process? Or what else could it be? And why did Putin come up with this story right now, at the very moment when active negotiations to end the war are taking place? We will be sorting all this out in this episode, so please subscribe to this YouTube channel, friends, and give it a like, and I'll get started so as not to waste your time. And we'll begin precisely with the statement from the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei "Horse" Lavrov. He said the following verbatim, let's quote, "The rebirth of the Kyiv regime, which has shifted to a policy of terror, will lead Russia to reconsider its negotiating position." End of quote. And honestly, at this point, you could just stop and turn it off. This entire episode, because it's already clear, everything is clear in general. Lavrov has said it all. But he went on to explain that supposedly Kyiv attacked Putin's residence, that all the drones were shot down at night, but this was a reckless attack and it will not go unanswered. So Lavrov is threatening Ukraine, saying targets for strikes. The Russian Ministry of Defense has already selected them, the planes. They're flying. We're going to bomb everyone. Russia is ready. In short, get prepared. These absurd accusations were responded to, and immediately, which is very important, by Volodymyr Zelensky. And he says, look, this is all fake and lies. And he explains why this is happening right now. It's clear that yesterday we had a meeting with Trump, says Zelensky, and it's obvious that for the Russians, if we don't have a scandal with America and instead are making progress, for them, that's a failure because they don't want this war to end. Now, with their statements that some residence was allegedly attacked, they are simply, I'm sure, preparing the ground to strike, probably at the capital. And then the president said that the government quarter could become a focus of attention for the occupiers. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha also emphasized that this is a manipulation to create a pretext for new Russian attacks and to disrupt the peace process. But that's not enough. Let's be honest, friends, we needed to get as involved in this process as possible from an informational standpoint, not just Zelensky, but others as well. We should have responded to this in a grand way. Meanwhile, what happened, happened. So what conclusion can we draw from this? From all of this, what can we do? Ukraine sees this as a classic Kremlin scheme. To invent a provocation, declare themselves the victim, and gain the right to strike at Ukraine, plus to disrupt the peace process. How did others react? It's also actually interesting how Donald Trump reacted to this. He said that he had just heard about what happened and that such a strike would be a very bad development. And the United States is clarifying the situation. Well, like more time is needed to clarify this story. His words came after a phone conversation with Putin, and Trump's second statement about this story was more critical toward Ukraine. No accusations, but with hints. He started talking about how it's good that he didn't give any guarantees there, and so on and so forth. But overall, Trump has already gotten a lot of flack. He really got a scolding because politicians in the US are already criticizing Trump for saying things before he has any evidence. What happens next? Next, Yuri Ushakov, Putin's aide on foreign policy, comes out. And here comes the main point. Friends, he gives a detailed account of that very phone conversation between Putin and Trump, which took place after Lavrov's statement. Ushakov conveyed that Putin complained to Trump, started whining about this so-called terrorist attack from Ukraine, and Trump supposedly was completely shocked, very outraged, and said that this would undoubtedly affect the American approach to working with Zelensky. The Kremlin, through Ushakov, is saying directly, we are changing our position in the negotiations because of this attack. What happens next? Next, friends, Russia's partners, the United Arab Emirates and Pakistan also respond. These countries are friendly to the Kremlin, that's no secret. They almost repeat all Russian narratives word for word, condemn this so-called attack, and express solidarity with the Russian Federation. This shows how Russia is trying to create the appearance of international support for its version of events, because they have engaged the entire mechanism, the whole machine. They even let out that half-drunk fool Medvedev from the madhouse. They let him out and had him comment, there were such words, I just don't want to include all of it in this episode. Read it if you're interested, but it's just horrific. And Medvedev wrote in English, just so you understand. Well, it's all clear here already. Everything is clear anyway, friends. And now let's go through the entire chronology from start to finish to understand what's happening. Look, so the meeting between Zelensky and Trump, there's a pleasant atmosphere, everything is fine, it ends late, no announcements, the night passes. By morning, there are no statements from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. That is, they say that Ukraine launched some drones, first in one number, then in another. but not a word about the attack on Putin's state dacha or state residence. Then, a few hours later, Peskov goes out to his court propagandists and also doesn't say a single word, saying that Putin's dacha was attacked, that we have Ukraine here, banderas and pan-Nazis. Zero reaction. Next day, friends, and during this day, Putin has a meeting with his generals. Again, no mention of an attack on the residence. There is nothing. Everyone is silent. Then in the evening, Kanyaka, Lavrov come out and are the first to report this type of attack publicly. Why Lavrov specifically? Because this is a message for an external audience. He is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But in reality, this is the business of the Ministry of Defense, the General Staff, and so on. And even that same Peskov, how should I put it? But no, they send out Lavrov. First and foremost, the main addressee is Washington. After that, Lavrov makes a statement, and almost immediately it begins. A phone conversation between Putin and Trump. And here, Putin personally whines to Trump and complains about this supposed attack he was just informed about. What does this mean, friends? This was a pre-planned information cover operation. First, an informational pretext is created, Lavrov's statement to the media, then it is used at the highest diplomatic level, Putin's call. For what purpose? For pressure. The Kremlin doesn't waste time making things up just like that. That's what you need to understand. Their goal is always specific. What do they want to achieve with this goal? It's all very simple. Justifying terrorist strikes, that's the main thing. They are preparing for new massive attacks on Ukrainian cities, the energy sector, and government institutions, as if to say we're just supposedly responding. Second, of course, is to shift the blame for the breakdown of negotiations. If the peace process hits a dead end or the Russian Federation disrupts it, they'll say it's because of Ukraine's attack on the residents. We wanted peace, but you see, we were attacked and so on. Next, it's to set up Ukraine in front of Trump. Putin is trying to convince Trump that Ukraine is an unpredictable terrorist that attacks during negotiations in order to undermine Washington's trust in Kyiv. Well, that's also clear. The fourth point is that it's a pretext for a complete change in their negotiating position. That is, they've already stated that Russia's position will be reconsidered. In other words, the fabricated attack is a pretext to refuse any agreements or to put forward new, tougher conditions of their own. And fifth, it's pressure on Ukraine. Obviously, the goal is to force us to make concessions by threatening a harsh response to this non-existent provocation. The funniest and most horrifying thing, at the same time in this whole story, is the complete lack of evidence, friends. Because the journalists, well, propagandists, directly asked Peskov, where are the drone wreckage, the drone fragments, where are the photos, the videos, the evidence? And his response is simply a masterpiece of propaganda. He says, I don't think there should be any evidence here. As for the wreckage, I can't say anything about that either. End of Peskov's quote. It's brilliant. So, a mass drone attack on the president's residence, no one saw it, no one heard it. And they didn't even show any debris there? The residents of Valde didn't hear any air defense activity at all. The Institute for the Study of War says that the Kremlin hasn't provided any evidence and that its goal is precisely to justify rejecting peace initiatives. That's all there is to it. But let's, friends, establish one simple truth. In reality, we would all like to see Putin's presidential residence destroyed along with him. Whether he gets taken out by a drone or a missile, it really doesn't matter. And as you know, most of the drones that fly into the territory of the Russian Federation or strike military targets in the temporarily occupied territories, that's us together with you. Thanks to our donations, Madyar, Malyuk, Budanov, and others are able to launch these drones and punish the Russian Federation for its crimes against us. Overall, many different auctions are held to raise money for weapons for Ukraine's defense forces. We recently closed a big fundraiser for 400,000 hryvnias together with you. By the way, thank you for that. And actually, I became curious about how all of this works. For example, which business do people trust the most? Which business does the most for the front, for our shared victory, for recovery? And then I came across a recent ranking of Ukrainian business leaders whom Ukrainians trust the most. This list includes Akhmetov, Pinchuk, Gorokovsky, Gerega, and Butkevich. And so, as this recent survey shows, Rinat Akhmetov has become the leader in the trust ranking among well-known Ukrainian businessmen. According to a survey by the Sokes Group, which was conducted in December of this year, 2025, 30% of respondents trust him. That is almost a third of those surveyed. Akhmetov is almost twice ahead of his closest competitor. 14.5% trust Viktor Pinchuk. The third position was taken by the owner of Monobank, Ole Orkovsky, 11%. In fourth place is Alexander Hereha with 9.5%. And in fifth place, Hennady Butkevich with 9%. So what does this show? For businesses to earn trust, You simply need to help the front in the fight against Russia. And look how well these businessmen are doing it, friends. The number of businessmen will only keep growing, and these people, well, let's be honest, they are showing real examples and results. So coming back to Russia's special operation, this information special operation, what do we have as a result? This is a typical Kremlin scenario. They invent a threat themselves. They choose the timing themselves, usually when there is progress in negotiations, right? They talk about it themselves through the minister, then through Putin, the Peskovs. They send out the Medvedevs and so on. They broadcast it to their allies. The goal is to remain in the position of the chosen victim, to get a carte blanche for new crimes and to undermine diplomatic efforts. Russia does not want peace. It wants pretext to continue the war. And this story about the attack on the residents, friends, is the perfect confirmation of that. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, subscribe more actively. Take care of yourselves, please, and see you next time.